Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're going to do a couple of things that I'll say right now you probably shouldn't do. And the first of them really is one that you shouldn't do if you're on Bedrock Edition. This is one of the major differences between Bedrock Edition and Java Edition because today we are going to go onto the roof of the Nether to start a few projects up there that will probably benefit our world for the foreseeable future. However, unfortunately, on Bedrock Edition, this kind of stuff is not possible. Or rather, it is possible to get onto the roof of the Nether, but there is a fixed build limit in the Nether dimension on Bedrock Edition, and you cannot build anything on the Nether roof. Whereas on Java Edition, you might be aware of this already, but the Nether roof is kind of an oversight in the Nether. Even though there is a Bedrock ceiling at Y128 in the Nether, it's still possible to build above that for an additional 128 blocks. The build limit in the Nether, even though the world height has changed in the Overworld, is still, I believe, 256. So we're going to gather a few supplies that we will need to do that. It's a fairly simple process, really, once you get right down to it, but we're also going to do a couple of things that will allow us to respawn on the roof of the Nether, and this is where we get to introduce something that I mentioned in the 101 questions episode, but haven't actually covered in the series yet, and that is respawn anchors. And we're going to craft the first one of those right now. We will need 3 glowstone, and we'll need 6 crying obsidian. And if you haven't gathered 6 crying obsidian in your world already, you probably haven't been trading with piglins, because piglins will give you crying obsidian renewably. You can also find it in ruined nether portals, both as part of the structure or potentially as part of a loot chest. Once we put 3 glowstone in the middle, sandwiched by 6 crying obsidian, we'll be able to craft ourselves a respawn anchor. And once again, I have no idea why the recipe for that didn't unlock earlier. But this is the other thing that you shouldn't do in Minecraft. You should not place a respawn anchor in the overworld. Or, well, you can, but you should not place and then charge a respawn anchor in the overworld or the end dimension, because, like beds, they have a tendency to explode. You see, ever since the Nether was introduced in Minecraft, a lot of folks wanted to be able to set their spawn there, but there were, of course, a few problems with that. First of all, the Nether didn't really have a day-night cycle, so you had to sync it up with the overworld whether you were skipping the day or night, and if that really mattered in the Nether. The other thing was that the Nether was fairly inhospitable as an environment, and if you got stuck there, it could kind of ruin a player's experience. It could be a bit of a problem for players to be stuck here without any access to resources, and if their Nether portal broke, it was a very difficult journey getting back home. So it wasn't until Minecraft 1.16, the Nether update, when Mojang really figured out what the deal was with the Nether and gave it a progression, gave it effectively all of the stuff that you needed to survive and thrive here. Wood types were added to the Nether, blackstone was added so that you could craft stone tools, you can get iron from trading with piglins and raiding nether fortresses. Basically, the entire tool progression is available here in the Nether now, and so that's why they introduced the respawn anchor, because now it's much more possible to set up a Nether base, set your spawn point here, and respawn at it. But there are still a couple of safety features just in case you get caught in a death loop here in the Nether, which allow the respawn anchor to not act indefinitely and eventually return you to the overworld in emergencies. We'll cover all of that in a few seconds' time, but for now we're going to try and get up above this formation of bedrock here on the ceiling of the Nether, and that's going to require us to find a couple of very specific patches of bedrock, which I believe will be different in every world. The bedrock in the Nether ceiling generates in a repeating pattern dependent on your world seed, so this is going to be in a different set of coordinates for every world. I believe that's still the case anyway. But we need to find a piece of bedrock up here which is at the uppermost point of where stuff can be placed in the world, and it looks like one up there might be the case. Let's see if we can get up here and take a look at the coordinates. If we take a look at the targeted block coordinates when I press F3, there we go. The block we are looking at right here, not this one above us, but that one there, shows a targeted block coordinate of 127 on the y-axis, so that is guaranteed to be a block that forms the very upmost layer of the bedrock ceiling here in the Nether, and it is through that block that we will be going, or maybe the block adjacent to it, because we have a couple of blocks to work with here. In fact, having a couple of blocks to work with here opens up another opportunity, so we can use a couple of different methods, and I'm going to use probably the more reliable one, as long as I have some material somewhere in here that I can make into slabs. This prismarine should actually do perfectly. So we'll turn 3 of those into slabs. We'll probably just need 1 of those. Let's make sure we bring everything with us, because we will need to bring everything with us. And then let's hop back up here and take a look at this block. Okay, so this block here is the one we're going to be placing the slab against like so. and we should now be able to ender pearl into that spot there. If we successfully ender pearl into that spot, we'll be standing basically with our head poking out of the top of the roof of the nether, and then all it will take will be another ender pearl to get us onto the nether roof. Alternatively, we might even be able to jump out of this depending on how the bedrock has formed. So let's cross our fingers and give this a try. Hup. And we can see through the roof of the nether, but it looks like we're not able to walk up onto any of the surrounding blocks, meaning that I just need to throw another ender pearl, and here we are on the roof of the nether. Well, that was nice and easy. The first thing I'm going to do is place down a couple of torches. Now, thanks to it being made entirely out of bedrock, you don't need to worry about anything hostile spawning on the roof of the nether, because the game doesn't treat bedrock as a spawnable block. It won't spawn anything on the bottom of the world, and it won't spawn anything up here on the roof. But as soon as we start placing any other solid blocks up here, that is when we have to be a little careful, because that will create spawnable spaces for the majority of the nether's mobs. That includes things like ghasts, piglins, basically whatever is able to spawn in the biome that we're standing in. And even though the nether is a massive cavern, it still has the same biomes from the bottom of the world to the top of the world, meaning that where we're standing right here is still technically a crimson forest. And we're going to be searching for a few different biomes up here on the nether roof to make a variety of different farms. We can make a very effective hoglin farm here on the nether roof without any terrain around it here in the crimson forest biome. We can also make a very effective farm for zombified piglins if we seek out a nether wastes. And that is the main reason for getting up here onto the nether roof, actually. It allows us to make a very fast, effective gold farm without needing to do any spawn proofing of a large area of the nether. But anyway, now we're up here, we have the problem of not really being able to get back down, and you might be wondering, are we going to be breaking through bedrock in this episode? Which, yes, can be done, even though bedrock is an unbreakable block when it comes to mining it with a pickaxe. We're actually not going to be breaking bedrock in this episode, and there are ways you can effectively avoid breaking bedrock entirely. Once again, this is the section where Bedrock Edition players won't really be able to do any of this, so my apologies to the Bedrock fans out there. But having brought 3 ender chests with me, I'm going to break 2 of those down using my fortune pickaxe so they turn into obsidian, and we're going to craft ourselves a nether portal up here. I'm going to put a few obsidian here, like so. We're going to make our usual portal frame. We'll dip back into the ender chest and grab the flint and steel, which I have in... oh, well, that's going to be a problem for me, isn't it? Let's see, I have some iron in here, but I don't have any flint. I did not bring a flint and steel with me, so effectively right now we are trapped on the roof of the nether. Well, not exactly, because I do have a bucket of lava here, and so we could potentially attempt 1 or 2 tricks to light a nether portal without access to a flint and steel, which was totally not my intention here, but we could definitely give this a go. First of all, I'll create a little pocket for lava here, and I'm going to put a couple of workstations adjacent to this, which are made out of wood, but will not burn. Like, stuff like containers, chests, barrels, that kind of stuff typically does not burn, because that would end up with the barrel breaking, the items spilling out, and the contents of the barrel also burning in fire or lava or whatever, which would be kind of a pain. But what I'm hoping for is that the lava here will actually catch one of these blocks on fire, and if the fire generates in one of these 2 spaces, that will actually be enough to light the nether portal without us needing a flint and steel to do that. It's happening to the crafting table already, but is it going to happen on this face of the block? That's the important part. There we go! It finally happened! Oh my goodness, that was a bit of a long wait. I ended up placing the lava 1 block further up just in case it would catch fire through the corner of the crafting table here, and oh, thank goodness that happened. Because believe it or not, there was an alternative to this, but the alternative would be a lot more complicated. Using the solid blocks I've got with me, and we do have a fair amount of prismarine, I would have had to go out, find a biome in which we could spawn zombified piglins. I would have had to kill a bunch of those to gather a bit of gold. We'd have had to come back to a crimson biome like this, try and spawn some regular piglins, trade with those with the gold ingots we gathered, and hope for getting a fire charge or some gravel and some iron that would allow us to get a flint and steel together. But instead, we have a nether portal finally up here on the roof of the nether. And that is the second thing that you shouldn't do in this episode. You probably shouldn't go to the roof of the nether without a flint and steel and some obsidian to make a portal. One last thing that you absolutely should do while we're here is slab off the roof of your nether portals to make sure that there are no solid blocks up here, because once again, if you get 23 blocks or more away from the solid blocks on top of there, that's potentially spawning space for things like piglins, which you don't especially want harassing you here on the roof of the nether. We're going to leave the ender chest here for now, because I'm not certain if we'll need to relocate this portal in the near future, but for now, we should be able to step on through this portal and return to the overworld. And lo and behold, we end up coming through the portal here at our storage building, which is great, actually. That's a really good place to be. But now the question remains, when we go back through this portal, where are we going to end up? And the answer is we end up coming back through to our nether hub, because of course we do. We have meticulously linked these portals of our nether hub to the portals in the overworld, and even though the Y coordinates are slightly different, the portal in the overworld is closer to the Y coordinate of this portal at Y68 than it is to the portal on the nether roof at Y128. So for the moment, in order to return to the nether roof, we'll have to come back up here and do the same trick we did before. Ender pearl onto this slab of prismarine, step up onto the nether roof, and that time it worked. That time I think we got a little bit of extra boost upwards from the damage I was taking, and that maybe propelled us up here onto the nether roof. But here we are, back by our portal. So a fairly simple, if currently kind of one-way trip. That is why you will often find people attempting to break bedrock on the nether roof. So you can basically just have a single ladder up and down. But that's not what we're going to do today, because we have a couple of other options. And the first option comes in the form of the respawn anchor that we crafted earlier. So if I place one of these around here, in the nether it will be safe to use, because if we charge this up using blocks of glowstone, you'll see right here that a quarter of this sort of full moon shape on the front of the respawn anchor and on the sides of the respawn anchor as well will start to fill in, and it will do that for each time you right click on the block, consuming a block of glowstone and giving yourself an advancement for filling it up all the way. It'll also produce a bunch more light. You can see that this whole area has lit up a little bit. This block is now actually producing light level 15 at the source, like it's a light level 15 emitting block. The swirling portal texture will also appear on the top of here, although it's not something you can jump into the same way you can with a nether portal. The purpose here is for it to act like a bed in the nether, and if we right click this, you'll notice it creates a sound effect. It says the respawn anchor has set our spawn, and in the chat there it says the respawn point has been set, meaning that if we now die or are put into any other situation that causes us to return to our spawn point, we're going to spawn here next to this respawn anchor on the nether roof. You might be wondering what kind of utility this has for hardcore players, because obviously hardcore players aren't in the business of dying very often. And personally, I try to die as little as possible in my Minecraft worlds anyway. It's kind of an inconvenience a lot of the time. Well, in this case, there is actually one other useful situation in which having a respawn anchor can be useful if you wanted to set up a base in the nether, and that's if you want to take frequent trips to the end. Once we're here in the end dimension, maybe we've gone out raiding for more shulker boxes, maybe we come here to repair our tools. The ender over here is basically my best XP farm in the world right now. We will need to return through the central portal, and what that does typically is return you to your spawn point, the last bed you slept in, or now in this case the last respawn anchor we set our spawn at, because if I hop on through the bedrock portal here, we will end up on top of the bedrock in the nether ceiling. Now, the one thing this doesn't do, interestingly, is consume a charge of the respawn anchor. Those 4 quadrants that appeared in this glowing indicator when we charged it up with glowstone blocks are actually kind of like your lives. They are the amount of times you can respawn at this respawn anchor after a death, before the respawn anchor will deactivate and it'll send you back to your spawn point in the overworld. It will say a charged respawn anchor is required for you to respawn there, and if this thing isn't charged, it sends you back to the overworld. So, once again, if you end up getting caught in a situation in the nether where you're in a death loop, you keep respawning at your respawn anchor and then like a hoglin or something keeps coming in and killing you, eventually the game will realize, oh, you've used up all of the charges here, probably time to send you back to the overworld because you're in a pretty tough situation. And that is the power of a respawn anchor pretty much in a nutshell. Now, once again, I was saying there were a couple of things we needed to know here and things that you should not do. Let's talk about what happens if you try to use these in a dimension other than the nether. For that, we will need to craft another one of these, which means 3 more glowstone and 6 more crying obsidian, and you do need to be a little bit careful about where you place a respawn anchor in the overworld, because if you right-click on one of these, much like a bed in the nether, they will explode. However, they won't explode until you've actually started charging them with glowstone. If you try to set your spawn at a respawn anchor in the overworld, then that's not going to go very well for you. But if the respawn anchor isn't charged up, it's not going to innately explode when you right-click on it, which means you can still use these for fun building projects if you want to. Like if you want to have some ominous pillars lining the pathway to one of your builds, crying obsidian actually blends really nicely with the bottom of the respawn anchor texture because it's made out of crying obsidian initially, and as long as you don't charge that with glowstone, it's probably going to be fine. But this wouldn't be a fun episode if I didn't demonstrate the respawn anchor exploding at least once, so I'm going to dump all of my gear up here in a shulker box just so I don't end up losing any of it. We're going to head on down to the beach where I do most of my explosives testing, and we're going to say goodbye to my 35 levels. Because, yes, as you can see, that leaves a pretty hefty crater in the ground, and it destroyed one ladder in that explosion, because I guess I didn't need the ladder after all. But that's roughly equivalent to the explosive power of a bed in the Nether. That is going to destroy a bunch of blocks, and it won't end up dropping all of them the way that TNT does. So, while you can use respawn anchors as explosive in the overworld, you need to take the same precautions that you do if you're using beds to mine for netherite in the Nether, and bear in mind that you're not going to get all of the blocks and stuff that are destroyed in this explosion. So if you're trying to harvest blocks in the first place, probably better off if you use TNT. Now, had I not just set my spawn point here in this bed right before we did that demonstration, that would have respawned me at the respawn anchor on the roof of the Nether. So as you can see, it's not always the ideal solution to getting back onto the Nether roof without having to break Bedrock. But once again, I mentioned that we're not going to break Bedrock today, and that's because we can just create another Nether portal that's going to link to that portal we now have on the Nether roof. And depending on how close we ended up building that portal to the exact coordinates of the portal for our storage room, we might be able to get away with just building a portal on the roof of the storage room here and getting a flint and steel to light it with. I have 4 of them in this chest by my main Nether portal. Why do I not bring one of those with me in my ender chest? Now, I think I had one in my ender chest until recently. I think I must have just put it in a chest by mistake or something like that. Now, we are at Y106. Let's see if we can connect to the Nether roof at this height. And we've done it. Okay, fantastic. So the portal's coordinates were, relatively speaking, closer to this one on the Nether roof than they were to the one down there in our Nether hub. So now we have a two-way connection to a portal on the roof of our storage building. And that's honestly worked out pretty well. Yeah, it's kind of amazing, but you can now create Nether portals that functionally work on the Nether roof. They will connect you to heights above the approved height for building in Minecraft Java Edition, at least. You'll be able to build a Nether portal up there, and it will relink to one here in the overworld, which I think is pretty fantastic, because the opportunities the Nether roof presents are actually pretty interesting. We have an entirely terrain-free environment up here, in which we can build basically whatever we want, and as I mentioned, that's where we're going to end up building a large-scale gold farm for this part of the series, basically to set us up until we have the time, we have the patience, we have a little bit more material we can work with, and then we might end up building a gold farm inside the Nether cavern, because to be honest, I recognize that a lot of people consider stuff like this a little bit cheaty. But seeing as we can link portals from the Nether roof to the overworld, this also affords us some interesting opportunities for stuff like transporting mobs. If we want to bring a mushroom back from a mushroom island to replace the one that ended up getting killed by a zoglin actually in the previous episode, in episode 101, where I brought a hoglin through to the overworld, it might be a little bit faster and easier to transport it through the Nether, and it will be even faster and easier to do that here on the Nether roof, where we have no terrain and no hostile mob spawns getting in the way. And you will also find many communities of people creating an entire Nether hub on the roof of the Nether, just to avoid the fact that they have to build tunnels and bridge over lava and do all of the complicated stuff that goes with navigating the Nether cavern. And while that's not my intention for this series, we could end up doing a couple of interesting things with the Nether roof here in the near future. But really what I wanted to do is demonstrate how to get up here onto the Nether roof and talk about respawn anchors, and I think we've accomplished both of those things in this episode. Now, excuse me, I'll go to the Enderman farm and replenish the levels that I had, because I'll probably need them for repairs sooner or later. But folks, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care, bye for now.